Then we will continue. The next one is Professor Nagasaka Itaru. You might have noticed we use the name order of Asian names, the names of presentators, yeah, in the order of their society. So Nagasaka is his surname. Okay, so Itaru, please, he will talk about migration, family, and gender views from Asia. Please.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Emiko Sensei. Today, I'd like to talk about migrations, issue of the migrations. Some chapters touched on the issue of the migration in that volumes we are introducing. So I like to focus on this particular topic. Next slide, please. Right, okay, since the 2000s, the notion of the transnational family has received scholarly attention as a result of the growing awareness of the international division of reproductive labor or global care chains. International migration of mothers and their ties with their family members who are left behind have become an important subject of scientific research. The literature on the transnational motherhood highlighted the emotional hardships faced by the migration mothers and by their children left behind. These studies have revealed that many of these hardships are caused by the prevailing gap between the homeland mothering norms that prioritize the face-to-face care by mothers and migrants' actual long-distance mothering practices. These studies then questioned how migrant mothers have grappled with such emotional hardships. For example, Hontagnu Sotelo and Avila, in their pioneering work, have detailed the emotional suffering of Latina mothers employed as domestic workers in the US, whose children were taken care in their homeland. They have demonstrated how these mothers who cannot pursue conventional mothering roles due to the separation from their children have redefined the motherhood by emphasizing their emotional ties through regular communication and remittances. Next slide, please. A lot of work has been done on the issues associated with the effects of the migration to family. However, there remain issues that are largely unexplored. First, because of the growing awareness of the increase of the migrant mothers under the global care chains, the existing literature has focused on transnational mothering and emotional difficulties experienced by the mothers and their children. As a result, the less attention has been paid to the views from other actors within or beyond transnational family. For example, we know little about the emotional changes of the fathers left behind by migration mothers and various carers of the migrant children, such as the grandparents. Secondly, the impacts of the family separation, both on mothers and the children, have been investigated by scholars in different academic disciplines. But due to their focus on the global migration or south-north migration, less attention has been paid to the trans-local families created by south-south migration or internal migration. Finally, most of the literature on the transnational parenthood has focused mainly on the migrant lives in the receiving societies. While it is no doubt that their lives in their destination is important to understand the nature of the transnational family, very few Western country-based migration scholars has conducted the extensive research in the origin societies. If we consider that many migrants have sustained translocal ties even after their periods of migration prolonged, and that origin societies have been the important point of the social reference for these migrants, it is apparent that we needed to pay more attention to the social context in the sending societies. Next slide, please. So if we keep in our mind these remaining issues about the transnational family, we can find many interesting and important articles in the Asian families and intimacies. Of course, we have many work in our collection that shed light on the historical formation of the family in the respective societies and the varieties. In this short presentations, I would like to focus on the two articles that directly argued the impact of the parents or mothers' migration to families. I first take a look at an article from Thailand, Growing Up Apart from Parents. This article is included in the volume 4, chapter 43, Drawing on the Interviews in the Rural Thailand. The author focused on the views of the grandparents as carers of migrant children. In the village studied, many children of migrants are taken care of by relatives, particularly grandparents. One grandparent of the migrant children mentioned, this is very normal. However, unlike the transnational households that sent members to the affluent countries in the global north, many of the carers cannot expect monetary benefit through such childcare arrangement. Although the author did not elaborate on the destinations of the migrant parents, based on this information, I suppose that many of them are migrating to the urban areas in Thailand. What the author found through the interviews is a grandparent's sense of affection and concern for their own grandchildren. 60-year-old woman taking care of the grandchildren mentioned that if their parents come to collect them, I think I would definitely miss them. The author further argued that while such childcare arrangement brought some challenges to the grandparents' lives, such as financial burdens and the decrease of their time for their social commitment in the community, these grandparents consider the arrangement as more positive option than living with their migrant parents, because they believe their parents do not have time to take good care of their children in their destinations. From this article, we could learn a lot about the views of the carers of the migrant children, characteristic of such arrangement caused by the internal migration. Next, please. Another article I would like to introduce is Remaking Masculinity by Alicia Pingle, the chapter 53, originally published in 2001. Drawing on her fieldwork in the northern Philippines, she addressed the question, what happened to the men's identities when their wives went overseas and became the main providers? In her research site in the Philippines, local notion of the masculinity evolves around being good providers, virile sex partners, and responsible fathers. But due to the demand of the female migrant labor in the global north or neighboring East Asian countries, they cannot be the main providers and they live apart from their partners. In such context, she focused on their definition of the masculine identity. Although I cannot explain her analysis in detail, her conclusion is that starting to emerge are varied masculinities, that is the plural. Some men remain guided by the traditional masculine code, some break away from it in keeping their new roles. In short, they are making a choice under the constraints caused by the feminization of the international migration. Next, please. Aside from the conclusions, we could find plenty of the interesting findings. For example, she elaborated on the power dynamics between these husbands, migrant wives, and the relatives. She touched on the emerging phenomena such as surveillance by their mothers-in-law, who see these men as inadequate providers. Sorry, there is a mistype. Aside from her conclusions, we could find, another important analysis is that one, with the elevated social status of the migrant wives in the sending societies and the husband uneasiness about the changing status of their migrant wives and the new behavior of their wives after migration. She stated that coming from another country and becoming dollar earners, they acquire higher status, hence invitations become frequent. But in many cases, she observed husband decline invitation to social event. We wonder how such feelings of uneasiness of the husbands affected the husband's behavior in other sphere of the family and their masculine identities. Next, please. She also made analysis of the issues of sexuality between these long-distance couples, which are largely unexplored in the literature. She argued how these men have responded to the threat to the power of the husband as master of the sexuality by taking concrete examples. The case where a man, for example, who were deserted by his migrant wife, tried to retrieve his manhood by becoming a devoted provider and then a disciplined father after starting to live with his new partner. That example is particularly interesting. Also, what she pointed out was the issue of the class in their sexualities. Her assertion that sexual fulfillment becomes a luxury for the working class is considered the hidden consequence of the development of the global care chains, about which we know very little. Next slide, please. Thank you. In these presentations, I introduced only 2 articles that touched on the issues of the migration and family. But I suggest that these articles show one way we use the Asian families and intimacy. That is, the article in the volumes allow us to reconsider the ways of questioning the family. In the case of this presentation, the questioning a transnational family. The article examines the intricacies of the migrant translocal lives. Both articles dealt with the multiplicities of the views on the family and the family practices in different spheres and their interrelationships. They also explored the multiple positionings of the migrants, both in and receiving societies, and their effects on the family and gender relations. Both issues are largely unexplored in the existing literature at its time, and to a lesser extent, even at the moment. If we could expand this argument according to my personal research interest, these articles suggested the need of a more relational approach to the transnational family and family practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.